Let's take a look at assignment 3. We're going to be creating a 2-color graphic with smart objects and adjustment layers. So this should actually be a pretty useful one. Heads up, the thing that tends to confuse students on this is that the file that you'll be turning in at the main area on your layers here in the file itself, you're going to have a smart object that contains a bunch of layers inside of it, and then a background, and that's it. All of your adjustment layers and everything is going to be inside of that smart object. So there are a couple of things that can go wrong. I'll show you how to fix it if that happens. Meanwhile, let's take a quick look at this. This assignment's worth 100 points. You're going to be turning in a PSD document. That's the only way I can actually make sure that you made the smart object. And the size is, for working, the size is going to be 10.5 by 7.5, and it can be in landscape or portrait, so you can make the wide dimension either the longest dimension, either the width or the height. That's fine. And the working resolution will be 300 pixels per inch. I'm going to have you shrink that down before you turn it in at the end so that everything will fit. At the time of filming this video, I'm going to say 150 ppi. But depending on how much trouble we have turning in the previous assignment, I might have you shrink it more. So please check the class to make sure that I didn't ask you to shrink it down even further. Okay, so here's my little spiel. The threshold adjustment is used to convert an image into black and white. Generally, this adjustment is used by graphic artists and illustrators to clean up traditional line work after scanning it into Photoshop. However, it can be combined with other adjustment layers for some stunning effects. For this assignment, you will be producing a graphic image using a smart object containing 4 or more layers. Those 4 layers, at minimum, will be 1 image layer, 1 or more overlay layers, 1 or more levels adjustment layers, and 1 threshold adjustment layer. Now, keep in mind, you don't need more than 1 threshold adjustment layer. Just put it at the top of your layer stack, and I'll show you what I mean on that in just a moment. So we're going to start by selecting a copyright-free photo, or a photo that you've taken or that you own the copyright to. So if you've purchased it, licensing, whatever, that's fine, that has a single subject or element that interests you. So if it's like a crazy, landscape or something, kind of narrow it down to one part of it. Like maybe the tree with the lake is a really great element there. That's fine. I don't want a whole entire image, of just like the city of New York going on. That might overcomplicate it. It's also important to, and you'll see why in a minute, we're going to be reducing this a lot. On the other hand, sometimes you guys surprise me and you're able to bend the rules and get great results. So if you think that's going to be the case, feel free to experiment. But if so, make sure you give yourself enough time to do it again in case things go wrong. Just a heads up on that. So we're going to be reducing it a lot. So this technique also won't work on illustrations or paintings. It has to be a photograph. I found it works best with things with feathers and things with scales. So iguanas, for example, work really well with this. So do birds, just absolutely excellent. There are a lot of other things, though. I encourage you to experiment. Once you get the hang of it, you'll see where it's going. So you found your image, you're happy with it. You're going to prepare your image by isolating and emphasizing the element or subject using the masking techniques you've developed from your previous assignment. Please either leave the background transparent or use a white background or background layer at this stage. If necessary, use color and level adjustments to improve the tonal quality of the image. Remember, your end goal will be a very high contrast image. Once you are satisfied, paste a flattened copy of your image into a 10.5 by 7.5 300 pixel per inch document. So let's go ahead and get that step done real quick. You'll see that as you recall from the previous demonstrations, I have a duck I've masked out. And so this is exactly the sort of thing I'm hoping that you'll have. Let me temporarily shift click on this to disable the mask. As you can see, this duck is on a background that's easy enough to cut out. And I did exactly that using the techniques that we've demonstrated in previous class. So you can watch the hours and hours that I went over masking to brush yourself up on that. Main thing is remember black conceals and white reveals. And before you can apply a mask, you have to unlock the layer, Fastest way to do that is Alt double click, or you can just double click the layer and it will pop out. Now keep in mind, it's not a smart object yet. And if you want, you could apply the mask at this point, but I wouldn't recommend that just yet. I would actually save that for later. Applying the mask at a later point may actually help you reduce the size of the image. So if you're having problems getting this uploaded, that's one way to cut it back. And I'll demonstrate that right here. See how it's a 12 megabyte image down in the bottom left corner here? Right click. Now generally this will shrink it down. Apply layer mask. Occasionally it won't. I am actually surprised. I'm guessing if I saved it, it would actually cut it down by a little bit, but I don't want to overwrite the file because there is less data here going in, although not substantially less data. You know what? In the new version of Photoshop, they might have gotten clever. There is a way for them to design it so that the black and the white are interpreted as the transparent. And they might have been doing this for a while and I just haven't noticed. In which case, the mask won't actually cause any size difference, assuming your mask is the same size as your image at the time that you flatten it. So disregard me on that. The new versions of Photoshop are wicked smart. So the next step is to bring this bad boy on over to a new document. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new document, and I'm going to make it wider than it is tall. So 10.5 by 7.5. And I'm going to go ahead and put it at 300 pixels per inch. I'll just use a white background. That's fine. We're going to change that later. Tell it OK. So I've got this document, brand new Untitled 1 document. I'm going to pop over to the duck, and I'm just going to right click on the duck layer. And over here, I have the duplicate layer way up at the top, duplicate layer option. I'm going to choose that. I could just drag it across, but I'm going to do it this way. And on the duplicate layer, when I click on the destination document, I can choose the Untitled 1 artboard here. There we go. The Untitled 1 documents, right? We'll call this duck, and this will be good because, and I'm not going to save on that, because once we convert this to a smart object, the smart object will be named whatever this was. So a smart thing to do is to name it in advance. Hello, duck. So we've got this duck. It's a good looking duck. All right, so we've gotten as far as the instructions have told us thusly. Our next step is to convert our image into a smart object. You can go to Layer, Smart Object, Convert to Smart Object, or in my case, I'm just going to right click on the layer and tell it Convert to Smart Object right here. Boop. And now we've got a smart object. You can tell because of the tiny little icon down in the bottom. And if you click on it and have the properties window open, and you can get to the property window by going to Window and Properties if it's unchecked, you'll see that it says that this is in fact an embedded smart object, which is exactly what we want. I'm going to go ahead and double click this to enter it. Now notice we're in the duck PSB, and it is a Photoshop big document rather than the Photoshop document itself. Because we did not file place embedded, we duplicated the layer over, right-clicked, and converted it to a smart object. If it is a standard layer at the time of the conversion, it becomes a PSB document. And you can see right now that we're up to about a 15 megabyte size. We're going to shrink this down after the fact. All right, so we have our smart object. Let's follow along with the instructions. Inside the smart objects, we're going to be creating some adjustment layers. First, we'll need to do an levels adjustment. Now, you might have already leveled the image, and so you may not need this right away, or in fact, you might not need it at all, and it's fine if you leave everything neutral because you found that it's not needed. That's fine. You can also take advantage of the mask that's on here. So if you just need to level a small area, you'll be able to do that. And I'll show you why that's the case right now. Now here's a tricky bit. We're going to be creating a 50% gray layer. So how do you create a 50% gray layer? I found that the easiest way is to go to the flyout menu on the layer palette and go new layer. That's Control-Shift-N on your keyboard. I encourage you to use those keyboard commands. They'll make you a faster Photoshopper. I just have my hands full with the printout of the document right now, so I can't hold down the Shift key and use the mouse, or in fact, do much more than what I'm doing here. Anyway, we've created a new layer. Notice that it's got a number of options available to it that we generally don't touch, but they're great. For example, We have the opacity, so we can set the same opacity that would be on the layer palette here down at the right-hand quadrant, bottom right quadrant. I'm going to say quadrant, that's such a great word. Quadrant right here. We can control the opacity that the layer will be once we've created it. We can also create, set the mode to something else. Notice that we have very lightly ghosted out, no neutral color exists for normal mode. This is important. The neutral color is referring to a color that will be ignored or knocked out depending by the mode. So if, for example, do you remember overlay, guys? This was a while ago. Overlay ignored 50% gray. That is gray that was 128 in its luminance value. And sure enough, we have the option now to fill the overlay with neutral color, which is 50% gray. Guess what happens when we select something like multiply, which would knock out the whites? Fill with multiply neutral color, white. Now on older versions of Photoshop, if I remember correctly, it just gives you the option to do gray. It wasn't until, I think it's the Creative Suite that it allowed you to do smart changes like this, which is great. If you don't know which color is neutral, like for example, screen should be black, you click on it and it will tell you. Fill with screen neutral color black. It's a fun way to look things up. Now in our case, we're going to do overlay. And the reason is, do you remember the overlay mode on our brush? When we set it, we were able to use black to make things darker and white to make things lighter. Overlay is very versatile and flexible, but you can also use it as a layer to have the same effect as brushing directly on the image itself, except now it's reversible. You can erase what you've done and return to where you were before. And let me demonstrate that for you. I'm going to go ahead and name this layer now so that I don't have to name it later though. I'll just put down everything. And this is called, hold on, it's so small, 50% gray in overlay. All right, well, that's descriptive. 50% gray overlay. Help if I could type lay. There we go. A couple of other things. Use the previous layer to create a clipping mask. That's just referring to the same thing when you alt click. If you did this with your postcard, alt clicking will use the layer below it as the clipping mask. So you'll only see whatever this layer has if the layer below it is active. So if you have text below it, only where the letters are, for example. And then you can color code these as well. This is fun. If you just want to highlight these, I don't want to do that right now, so I'm just going to leave these. All right, time to tell it okay. Cool. All right, so we've got our 50% gray overlay. Now, there's no gray, right? Well, it's an overlay. We put it to normal. I forgot to check the box, so let me do that again. Control-Shift-N. Make sure to check the box this time. Overlay, click that button. Layer 1, call this 50% overlay. There we go. So now there's the overlay. Now this is interesting, isn't it? So notice that we've got this 50% gray only showing up on the outside of the duck. Now there's a reason for that. And this is why I was saying transparency with white background. Notice if we disable the mask, we can't see it. When we enable the mask, we can see it. I'm going to save this real quick. The duck PSB embedded in here. See this gray? This is going to be problematic when we introduce the threshold because that could turn black. Now, if you want that, that's fine. But 9 times out of 10, you're not going to want that. So what you're going to want to have done is back at the duck layer, have provided a white background. But you can do that now. That's fine. And I will do exactly that. Watch what happens. If I can drag this new layer down, I'm just going to press D on the keyboard for default, and I'm going to Control Delete so that it fills it with the white background. And notice all of a sudden we cannot see the gray. If we set the overlay to normal, we could see it, but on overlay, we cannot see it. So this assignment doesn't say have a white background inside the smart object, so this could be a little trap for you guys. So go ahead and instead merge down one. I like to use, Control E, which will merge down one layer. There we go. And notice that I lost my name, so I'll call this duck and have my duck again. I've got my 50% overlay and I'm about ready to go. Now back here, I forgot to save. Back here, the duck's white, which means that you'll still have this shape. This will be fine. I'm planning ahead. we're going to use the multiply mode in the end to knock out that white. So don't worry about that yet. So again, let's re-enter our Photoshop big embedded smart object. I'm going to double click the thumbnail. Boom. I'm back at the duck PSB. All right. So there's one piece of this puzzle missing. If you take a look at the top, make a threshold adjustment layer. Just like the levels or the curves adjustment layer, this is under the black-white icon on the layers palette. And that is the adjustment icon in the middle here. And it should say create new fill or adjustment. I'm going to click that. And I'm going to set it to levels. And now, no, I'm sorry. Why did I do that again? I was looking at levels. I'm going to set it to threshold. There we go. And voila. Ooh, pretty, right? So we've got like these interesting little speckles going on. It's kind of looking like a lithographic image. Things are going well. Now's a good time to go back to your original document and save it, because that's a lot of work. And I'm going to go ahead and call this, what are we on? Assignment 3 dash last name dash first name. And in my case, this is the first iteration. I'm going to call it 01. I'm going to toss this right in my week 3 folder where I can find it. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop document. And I'm going to tell it OK because it's asking about maximum compatibility. That's perfectly fine. So far, this document's just 13 megabytes. Things are going pretty well. That's the setup for this assignment. Now it's time to actually do the editing. And we're going to do that in the next video. So if you want to grab a drink of water before you play the next one, that's absolutely fine. I will see you in a few minutes. Or if you want to spend some time before you check out the next bit, that's cool. Don't forget to watch the next video. It has the rest of it. This is not yet A quality work. There's still more to do. All right, see you in the next one.